Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today is the last in a series of histories that we're doing on W.R. Case and Son knives. It's going to cover a time period from 1972 all the way up till the present time. Probably the most important time in case history. And if you're like a lot of folks, like me, we tend to criticize these knives awful lot, and there's a number of different ways you could approach a history from a timeline, from a factual standpoint, from an information standpoint. But I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about the transition of Case from 1972 out of the Case family into American Brands, and then back into the public sector, and then back private again, and finally to Zippo. And it's a really interesting read because I focus a lot on what is actually going on in the company, and a lot of introspective views from the actual workers, the people who were making these knives, and the anguish that they went through and the trauma. It's almost unbelievable what a company goes through when it's sold, and the company is pressing to make more money out of the same product, and wanting to make it cheaper, and the people just don't want to do it. And so we're going to talk about that a lot, because I think it may change your opinion of Case, or at least give you a better understanding of what's really going on inside the company. So I hope you see you in this video. All right, knife wars in the woods. Sherry's got her Kubi Phylum, and she's getting way too close. Stop. Hey, welcome back to the Fortified Castle. Man, exciting, interesting view at Case knives that we're going to have today. A lot of insider information from employees, from people that worked at Case, and maybe we can understand a little better what's going on in Case. I am going to use my notes for this because it's a lot of information, and I don't want to leave anything out. And so with that, I'd just like to thank you all for coming back and checking out this video. If this is the first one you've seen, there's two more. I'll list the links so that you can watch the entire Case history, at your leisure sometime. But I want to thank all my viewers for tuning in. Bonjour, privet, guten tag, hola, ciao, konnichiwa. Good day, mate, to my foreign viewers. And I really thank all of y'all for your support from the bottom of my heart. I really do. Enjoy your comments so much. It's just a lot of fun to interact with y'all. And so without further ado, let's get into this. So at the start of this, I think we really need to understand what's going on in 1970. And so in the 60s, you had Cattaraugus fold in 1963. Robeson has just gone out of business in 1965. Ka-Bar is sold. And so the knife industry is condensing, and it's because of inexpensive foreign imports is putting a lot of pressure on these companies to try to survive. And to give you some idea of where Case was at this time frame that we're talking about, in 1972, Case had 1,000 employees. They were working out of the old Bradford plant that was built in 1904. They had a couple other facilities, one in Nashville and one in Arkansas, and these were finishing warehouses, and one of them was a scissors warehouse. The Case was still involved in kitchen cutlery. Remember, they had a relationship with Al Cass and also Burl Cutlery, who was making kitchen cutlery. So you have a contraction going on. You have demographic changes. People are buying less knives. It's harder to make money on these knives. It's a time frame when wages are going up in America, but inflation is soaring. And so the price of the goods are going up at the same time that the cost of making the goods are going up. And really an unstable time in the history of the United States, by the way, the 70s. That's the time I grew up in. That said, Case really had good demand. So as these other companies are folding, people are moving to Case because at the time they're the highest quality knives being made in America, coming out of a factory. Camillus is still there, Imperial is still there, Utica still making knives, K-Bar's making knives through an affiliate, but Case is the go-to company. So demand is strong for them, and they just can't meet that demand. So they're months behind on delivery. Sometimes it'll stretch almost to a year in delays in delivery from Case to fill the demand. So there's a lot going on, and that's kind of the picture of Case in 1972. So in 1972, John O'Kane and Russ Osborne, relatives, Case relatives, and Bob Bargeson, who was not a member of the Case family, attended a meeting with American Brands in New York City. The purpose of that was to sell the company. John O'Kane, he just wanted to retire. Russ Osborne, he wanted to sell the company. And he was able to do that. He had his shares and his sister shares of the company were the majority vote. So he was able to sell the company outright. And Bob Bergerson, he was the sales manager at that point in time, vice president of sales, had been with the company a long time. He didn't have nothing else to do. All he wanted to do is keep his job. And Russ had asked Bob to come with them to this meeting to get his opinion on it. So they sit down with American Brands, and it was all milk and honey. American Brands was going to pay a good price for the company. They wanted Russ to stay on for 2 years and John O'Kane to stay on for 5. And then they guaranteed Bob Ferguson's job. And they were committed to the company and improving the company. They said that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to build the company. And so with that, it all sounded good. John, Russ, and Bob went outside, had a little bit of a talk. They all agreed it was probably the best deal for everybody involved, including the employees. And so they went back in, and it was a done deal. Case is sold to American Brands in 1972. So when Russ gets back, they immediately find property. They found 20 acres, and they start building a 70,000 square foot modern factory that complied with all OSHA regulations. It was a factory that was more than enough room, and not only was it more than enough room to consolidate all operations and build knives, but also it was plenty of room to build on. And so really good deal. The factory cost $3,368,000 on Owens Way. That's South Bradford. And during the time period that factory was being built, Case continued to work out of the North Bradford facility, the old one from 1904. At that time, the Case had 1,000 employees. And I don't know. I figure their revenue was around I don't know 20 million, something like that. Um, Today, Case has a revenue of around 98 million, and the employees range between 100 and 300. Most of the time, it's right around 100. So a lot has changed at Case, and they're doing really well there today. But anyhow, the new factory allows Case to do all of its blanking, its heat treatment, um, the building of the knives, of 114 patterns of pocket knives, 25 patterns of hunting knives, and 83 patterns of kitchen knives. So when Case was sold to American Brands, Outcast didn't want any part of that, Alcoa, and so Case sold back his interest in Outcast to Alcoa. So they no longer had that relationship with Alcoa to build kitchen knives. And that's how they entered that and started making their own knives. But everything wasn't good. So almost immediately, American Brands is wanting to cut costs at Case. In 1972, there were about 300 hand functions to make one of these knives here. And by 1975, that process had been whittled down to 250. So they eliminated 50 processes. This caused a lot of problems. So there's something we talk about as Case collectors a lot. Why can't Case make a knife with no gaps? Why this? Why that in these knives? But it's because of money, right? So they're trying to make enough money to stay afloat. And to do that, you have to increase production and cut costs. And that's what American Brands was doing. The employees didn't like it. There was a lot of friction, not only with employees, but remember, a lot of the management had been with the company for 30, 40 years. So employees and management. The result of that was American Brands would come in and just summarily fire people. The guy who was doing that was called the Bear Killer, I think they called him. And he would come in and just fire people, management, employees, whatever. And so he's whittling down the personnel, making it harder to make knives, causing the employees did not like producing less quality knives. So a lot of friction there. It was a unionized employee population. So there was only so much that American Brands could do as far as wages were concerned. And so it was the knife that suffered. And so they were cutting costs by, like, for one thing, if you look at these knives, the blade stock is smaller, so they were reducing the blade stock to save money on steel. They contracted cheaper steel companies and cheaper material companies, and so the materials weren't as good as they used to be. So in 1981, Bob Buckarson. It's hard to say his name. I'll put the spelling of his name up there. But in 1981, he's had enough, and he retires simply because of the friction between American Brands and Case knives. And in 1983, John Osborne Jr. retires, and he's the son of Russ Osborne, who ran the company for 30 years. And at this time, it's the first time in the history of Case that Case is not run by a family member or has a family member in it. And the morale of the company is pretty low because of everything that's going on. American Brands sends somebody in that has never worked in cutlery before, knows nothing about knives, and that starts bigger problems. So during this time frame, uh, uh, case users, people who are using these knives, and collectors are noticing the downturn in the quality of these knives. All these knives right here are from the 70s. They were all made in the 70s. And you can kind of see that as you look through these knives and go through the years, like this is a 1970, it's a 10 dot. And when you get to 1975, you see some significant changes in these knives. And by the time you get to 1980, this is a 10 dot right here, 1980. And when you get to this point, one of the things you notice, for instance, the blades are not mirror anymore. They have that same brushed stainless steel that Schrade knives have. And you also see in the tang area, it's not as clean. These used to be mirror polished. Also, the back of the back springs used to be mirror polished. And you can see the marks in them uh, from where they have not ground them down to mirror polish them. And so you're seeing the quality of these knives slowly go down. This is a 1987, I believe. And when you look at this knife, one of the things you notice is you can see the gap there. And so this is where these gaps start appearing. They're no longer trying to fit these blades to the backstring so that you have smooth transitions. Now it's not sharp, they've rounded the backspring, but they're just not taking the time to do the job right anymore. And that's not the employees, that's a management decision to do that. Even though this is a nice looking knife, and I like this knife, and uh, it's a good quality knife, but these are the things that you're seeing happen to case, and just a slow erosion of quality in the knives. So American Brands owned case knives for 16 years. Come 1988, American Brands is just fed up with case. The employees and management fought them tooth and nails. It was not a good fit. It wasn't a good relationship. American Brands was not a sporting goods producer. They produced home products. And so they didn't understand the industry. They never had anybody work a case that was a member of the cutlery industry. And so a lot of friction, low morale at a case, low production, and poor quality is plaguing the company. In 1988, a guy named Jim Parker, who seemed to be the perfect fit. Jim Parker was a collector of knives, and he produced knives. He was the founder of the National Knife Collector Association, the organizer of the Cutlery Museum. He was a knife manufacturer, and he owned the largest cutlery retail store chain in the nation. I think that was called Knife World, if I recall. And so Jim Parker was able to buy case at a ridiculous price from American Brands, because they just wanted to dump it. They were done. They wanted to get away from case. Jim Parker immediately started to fix the problems at the company, and morale, quality. This is the era when he brings case back to bone handles and producing models they had long since quit producing. Problem was there were some things going on in his financial empire that caused him to go bankrupt. It was not related to Case. Case didn't drag down Jim Parker. He was overextended. Interest rates were going up. That probably had a lot to do with the financial trouble he got into. But he entered into bankruptcy in 1990, and at that point, Case is in really serious trouble, and so a investment group called Rivers Associate out of Chattanooga, Tennessee, which was the home of Jim Parker, came to the rescue and bought Case. And so initially, this story gets really bad, and it'll blow you away. But so you've got a situation where you have low morale. The employees have had it, the management have had it, everybody's had it. Rivers, though, specializes in turning companies around like this and immediately empowering people. So they're that kind of a manager. They're not like American Brands. They're going to come in there and they're going to tell Case employees, "Hey, you do what you know best. Produce a good knife for us, and we'll look out for you." But Rivers Associate knew that they could not turn Case around at the wages that Case were being paid. It just could not be done. And so they knew they had to break the union. And when Rivers Associate went into Case, the very first day they fired everybody at Case. Everybody, managers, employees. And then they told them, "Okay, we'll hire you back at these wages." And so they cut their wages like 30-40%. And so they're firing these people, and then they tell them, we'll bring you back at half what you were getting paid for before. Now that sounds like a really good deal, doesn't it? Man. So, Rivers Associate brings back 87 people. Eventually, more and more people came back, but initially, only 87 people returned to the company. And Rivers Associates started turning the company around with those 87 people. And what they said, what they promised, was true. They started supporting employees. They started listening to employees who had ideas on how they could improve quality and cut costs. Rivers Associate took all of that and implemented it, so people felt empowered. They felt good about working someplace again, and so the morale was raised. And eventually, I guess that got around, and so more and more people came back to the company, even though the wages were less. Rivers Associate had no intention of running Case. They were going to turn it around and sell the company, and so they only had the company a couple years, and they were looking for suitors, and they found a company that worked out of Bradford that had a passion for Case in the people of that community, and that was Zippo out of Bradford, Pennsylvania. Before I get too far down the road here, I want to talk about this knife here. It's a Case classic, and this harkens back into the era of Jim Parker. And this is a pattern that hadn't been seen since World War II. And you can see the pattern there. It's a 113 pattern right there. 113 pattern. It's a slim Coke bottle, and let's see, when you look at this, it does have the Case XX there. What's on the other side? You can see it's stamped Roger Bone. A lot of these will have the Roger Bone stamp on the front of them, of these. And so the idea was to bring back long lost patterns. And this is one of them right here. Had not been produced since 1940. It was discontinued. And a very thin Coke bottle knife. It looks like a Coke bottle, but it's much thinner. Very long blade, big knife, really big knife. And it was a brainchild of Jim Parker. So they were going to do 37 different knife patterns and produce 3,000 of each pattern was a plan. 500 of those went into mint sets, so actually individuals were only getting 2,500 of each pattern. That said, very few of these patterns were made by Case. So Case, I think, made the Congress pattern, the 88 pattern, the 94 gunboat pattern, and the Satterhorn pattern. I can't remember the last pattern that they produced. May have been this one, I'm not sure. But the rest of them were contracted to Bluegrass Cutlery, who used Queen to produce those knives. So, after Jim Parker declared bankruptcy and left Case, he still had the trademarks in the agreement with Case to produce knives, and so he continued to do that up, I think, till 1994, and that was an idea to bring back, more collectors into the Case environment. That was his brainchild, and Case kind of continued that thought as they went on. So in 1993, Zippo buys Case, and immediately that's a good thing. So they retained one of the people who was popular there to run the company from Rivers Associates, and the company started to flourish again. They slowly turned that around, the morale problem around, fixed the quality problems, and Case was off and running again. In 1997, they created the Case Collector Club. In 95, they started the limited editions, which I don't think I have one here. I don't think I have one, but yeah, this is a limited edition, as a matter of fact. And so it's a little different than before. They're a lot bigger numbers, so it's 3,000 today, limited editions. But in 95, it was 1,000. So a limited edition, they would produce 1,000 knives, all to create and support a collector market. And so that's bringing us up into the 2000s. So once again in 2000, in between 2000 and probably up to about 2010, Case was suffering problems again. And so some of those problems were like the blade play was just ridiculous on them. The coarse backspring problems, but also like the grinds on their blades were really, really wide, and ridiculously apparent. And so in 2010, I think they made a renewed effort to improve their quality again. And so I think they've come a long way. I've noticed over the past 3 years their quality improving. It's not perfect, but the thing I want to point out here and just talk about briefly is, and ask this question, what if Case did not exist? And so probably 70% of the new Case knives I have some type of gasping problem. This one does not. And I have a number of Case knives that are just perfect. And they're not the best produced. I could pick little things out about the knife, but they're pretty good build quality on these knives. And that's why a lot of people buy these knives. You see really good transitions here. The grinds are really good on the knives. They're not polishing the back of the back spring, but really, who cares? Nobody really sees that anyhow. They do look good. They do polish them up and clean them up some. But what if Case wasn't there? And when we complain about a company, it's easy to complain about all this stuff, but as I talked to you before, you kind of get the insider view on what's going on and the struggles a company goes through to try to stay profitable and stay in the game. And when you look at these knives and you look at the knives coming in from China, China is just dumping knives into the United States, and you have companies like Case or any American company really trying to compete with a company that is dumping knives into the United States at below cost. In a lot of cases, I know these knives coming in from China cost way less than they do to make them, and yet we still have them. You look at these Rough Rider knives, you know, a knife this size, and it's $7. And just common sense tells you there's no way you could produce that knife for $7. For one thing, the materials in these knives alone, this is a small knife, a model 47, but materials in this knife alone would cost, you know, $10, $12. And so you can't sell it for 7 and not, you know, not be selling it below cost. And that's a competition that American companies are under today. And so it's easy to be critical of these knives. I just ask you to think for a minute about all that goes into making these knives. And I think we're down to about 160. So it takes 160 hands-on functions to make this knife, but it tells you a lot. I mean, in 72, Case had 1,000 employees. Today they have around 125 employees, and so it's highly mechanized. And the reason that is they're trying to make money to survive. And I mean, that's the name of the game. If they can't make enough money to survive, then they can't produce product. That's the bottom line. And when you look at the cost of things, you know, I go out to the movie, I spend $68 to go see a movie. And then, you know, I can pick a knife up. I picked this knife up right here, beautiful knife, for 40 something dollars. So, you know, there's a lot that goes into this knife, and it costs more to go to the movie than it does to pick this knife up. So when you look at that, American companies are, you know, just fighting for survival. The reality is, if you made these knives properly, they cost hundreds of dollars to buy them. And so something's got to give somewhere. That's the thing that I started to realize. And anyhow, just think about that. And I hope you enjoyed this series. This is the last video in the series. And I really appreciate you guys for watching. Look forward to your comments on all of that. And that should be interesting. And so thanks again. Don't forget, I'll see you tomorrow on the live show, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.